Albert was playing a game of truth or dare. His dare was, check your phone. Among everyone in his contacts, who had he said I like you to the most? The campus beauty, 3 times. Me, 972 times. The cheering around us died instantly. Even the campus beauty burst into tears. Albert deleted my contact in front of everyone and smiled as he comforted her. You're crying over this? You already know, don't you? I only dated her for 3 months to keep up appearances. None of that meant anything. Those 900 plus I like US were messages Albert had sent while he was drunk. He had been squatting by the side of the road, impossible to pull to his feet, doing nothing but typing those same words to me over and over. Once I send all 999 I like yous, the bet is off, and we'll be together for real, okay? Chapter 01. When Albert deleted me on WeChat, he never looked my way even once. An awkward silence settled over the private room. Everyone wore complicated expressions, stealing glances at me from time to time. Katerina's sobs gradually quieted. You really don't have any feelings for her at all? Albert wiped away her tears with a soft smile. What are you talking about? I already told you, it was never real. Katerina pressed on. Then why did you tell her I like you so many times? Weren't you only together for 3 months? Albert paused ever so slightly. His voice turned flat. I was drunk. I don't really remember. At last, Katerina calmed down. Today's gathering was our class monitor's birthday party. The mood never recovered after that. Everyone forced themselves through the cake cutting before finding excuses to leave. One after another. Visibly relieved. Chapter 02. The restaurant wasn't far from my apartment. As I walked home, I couldn't stop thinking about those 972 I like US. 2 of them were sent not long after we started dating. The other 970 were all sent on the same day. The day Albert got drunk. Back then, I still didn't know he had only dated me because of a bet. A bet between him and Katerina. They had grown up together. Albert had always liked Katerina and had confessed to her countless times. But Katerina thought his handsome face attracted too much attention. It made her feel insecure. So when Albert confessed to her again 6 months earlier, she casually pointed at me, the most invisible girl in class. If you really mean it, then date a random girl for 3 months. And during those 3 months, you're not allowed to fall for her. The moment the deadline is up, you break up with her. If you can do that, I'll say yes. The day Albert got drunk, we'd already been together for over 2 months. One of his friends was scrolling through videos at the dinner table and scoffed. What year is it? People still believe this nonsense? Look at this. It says if you send the person you like 999 I like you messages within 15 minutes, you'll end up together forever. Albert gave my palm a gentle squeeze before taking another sip of alcohol. He looked like he hadn't taken it seriously at all. But after we left the restaurant, he squatted alone by the roadside. His fingers flew across the screen. No one could get him to stand up. As one I like you after another popped up on my phone, I couldn't help but sigh. I crouched beside him and coaxed gently. Come on, let's go home, okay? The temperature's dropping tonight. If you stay out here in the cold any longer, you'll catch a cold. Why are you believing something this childish? We're already together. The glow of the phone screen illuminated his face. His expression was completely focused. His fingers never stopped moving. Freya, if I send all 999 within 15 minutes, the bet will be over, and we'll really be together, okay? I was just about to ask him what bet he was talking about. What are you two doing over here? For more than 10 minutes. No one had managed to stop Albert. Then the moment that familiar female voice came from behind us, the words in Albert's typing box were never sent. Katerina walked over. Her gaze shifted between Albert and me. Come on. Albert's just making a drunken fool of himself. No one's been able to talk sense into him. Since you're here, why don't you try? You two have known each other since you were kids. Albert deleted the unfinished words from the text box. The screen went dark. The light reflected in his eyes disappeared with it. He stood up, lowering his gaze. I'm sober. Then, without making a scene, he sidestepped the hand I had reached out to hold. In a low voice, he said, Let's go. I'll take you home. After that night, he never mentioned those 970 I like US again, as if none of it had ever happened. Half a month later, on my birthday, Albert broke up with me and finally told me about the bet. I slapped him across the face. His expression didn't change, wearing that infuriatingly handsome face. He said calmly, "Hit me as much as you need, then we'll call it even." Chapter 03. The memories came to an abrupt stop as I reached my apartment building. Albert was standing not far away. Beneath the loose strands of hair falling over his forehead were eyes as deep and still as a dark lake. He was quietly watching me. After 2 seconds of eye contact, he looked away. "Oh, took the wrong turn." I said nothing and walked past him. Freya. His black hoodie carried a faint scent of mint cigarettes. He stopped me again. "That last phone call you made to me a month ago. What were you going to say?" I didn't answer his question. I only said, "We settled everything that day. From now on, other than seeing each other at school, it'd be best if we had nothing to do with each other." Albert let out a quiet laugh. "You're right. We're just ordinary classmates now. Classmates who don't even have each other's contact anymore. Sorry for bothering you, Freya." His footsteps gradually faded away. Under the streetlight, his tall figure cast a long, slanted shadow. Little by little, it disappeared into the evening. After he dumped me out of nowhere, I spent days in a daze. Most of my classes passed with my mind somewhere else. To make things worse, my period came early. The cramps were so bad my lower abdomen felt like it was being dragged down, and they triggered one of my migraines. By the time I finished classroom duty, everyone else had already left. I was the only person on the entire floor. The pain became so unbearable that I collapsed over my desk. Without thinking, I called Albert. "Hello." His familiar, clear voice came through the phone. Then, "Albert, want me to answer it for you?" A second later, a girl's voice grew louder on the other end. "Freya, right? Looking for Albert? He's right beside me. Whatever it is, just say it. He can hear you." I snapped back to my senses. Without saying a word, I hung up. I stayed slumped over my desk, forcing myself to wait until the pain eased a little before struggling to my feet and leaving. The security guard looked at me in surprise. "You're still here at this hour?" I tried to smile, but I couldn't. Chapter 04. The class monitor's birthday party had been on Friday night. I thought getting deleted on WeChat would bother me for a long time. Instead, I woke up the next morning and found that I was already over it. School started again on Monday. As usual, I stopped by the breakfast stand near school to buy a cup of soy milk. The owner glanced behind me and teased, "Back again with your boyfriend for soy milk, young lady?" I froze. "What?" I turned around and unexpectedly met Albert's eyes. Katerina leaned out from behind him. "Uncle, you guessed wrong. He's my boyfriend." The owner looked at me, then at Albert, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. Katerina smiled and explained, "You must have misunderstood before. The whole dating thing between them was just part of a game. It was never real. I'm the only girlfriend he's ever had." The owner suddenly understood. "You young people sure know how to play." Katerina laughed. "Last time Albert brought me a cup of your soy milk. It smelled amazing. It was even better than the soy milk I've had at Michelin-starred Chinese restaurants. I even told my dad to order 1,000 cups so everyone at his company could try it." The owner waved his hands with a grin. "You're such a sweet talker." That was Katerina. Beautiful. Born into a wealthy family, yet never acted like a spoiled princess. Bright, warm, and effortlessly considerate. Most of the boys in class liked her. The girls all wanted to be her friend. I took my soy milk and scanned the code to pay. Just as I turned to leave, a hand grabbed my arm and pulled me back. Right in front of me was the pot of boiling soy milk. The water inside was bubbling violently, sending up waves of scorching steam. I had almost brushed against it. Albert's grip on my arm tightened. His eyes darkened. "You still haven't fixed that habit of never watching where you're going?" Katerina's smile stiffened for a brief moment. I gently pulled my arm free. "Thank you." Then I walked past the two of them without looking back. Chapter 05. Harder than being forced to see Albert at school was having to keep sitting next to him. Not long after I got to the classroom, Albert and the others arrived. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him walk over. I lowered my head, stood up, and pushed my chair in to make room for him. Albert turned sideways and slipped past. I sat back down. The entire time. We never once looked at each other. Katerina walked over and rested a hand on my desk. Albert, we'll be changing seats next week. How about we sit by the window in the third row? Albert lazily tapped his pen against the desk. Sure. Katerina sighed dramatically and patted me on the shoulder. Freya, I'm afraid I have some bad news. I just found out everyone in class has already picked their seatmate. But since there's an odd number of students, that means you'll have to sit by yourself for the next 2 months. The tapping of Albert's pen stopped. I didn't look up. Still correcting my homework. I answered softly. It's okay. Not long after Katerina returned to her seat, Albert suddenly slid open the window beside him. The class's PE representative, who sat behind us eating breakfast, yelped. Hey, Albert! My steamed buns are getting cold. Albert lowered his eyes. It's stuffy. Chapter 06. I had been looking forward to the seat change. When Friday finally arrived, I let out a long breath of relief. During the break, everyone's attention shifted to the new transfer student. A transfer student in senior year? Yep, I heard about it in the office this morning. It's a guy. I even caught a glimpse of his photo. Man, he's seriously handsome. Really? More handsome than Albert? I'd say they're about even. Well, that means we'll have an even number of students now. No one will have to sit alone. I didn't think much of it. As long as I didn't have to sit with Albert anymore, I didn't care who my new seatmate was. By the end of the school day, the gloomy sky that had hung overhead all afternoon finally gave way to rain. It was my turn to stay behind and clean the classroom. I left nearly an hour later than everyone else. When I reached the school building's entrance, the rain still hadn't stopped. I hadn't brought an umbrella, so I could only wait under the awning. Then Albert and Katerina came into view. They were running back from the sports field. Albert had taken off his school jacket and draped it over Katerina's head to shield her from the rain. Katerina pulled out a couple of tissues and stood on tiptoe to dry his rain-soaked hair. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I insisted on feeding the stray cats on campus. And you got soaked because of me. Albert tilted his head slightly. It's fine. I can do it myself. The rain grew even heavier. The security guard came over, jingling a huge ring of keys as he shooed everyone away. I'm off work. The school's locking up. The 3 of you should head home. The bus stop was still a fair distance from the school. I'd be completely drenched by the time I got there. My eyes landed on the security booth by the front gate. Its roof extended out just enough to provide shelter from the rain. I hugged my backpack to my chest and dashed into the downpour. Freya! I vaguely thought I heard Albert call my name, but it was quickly swallowed by the sound of the rain. I figured I'd imagined it. Chapter 07. It was already rush hour, the worst possible time to get a ride. My phone showed 57 people ahead of me in the queue. I let out a frustrated sigh. I just hoped the wind wouldn't pick up. Otherwise, even the roof wouldn't keep the rain off. Katerina and Albert walked over in raincoats. The rain grew heavier. Then the wind started howling. Cold rain blew in sideways and splashed onto me, even with my heels pressed against the wall. I was soaked within minutes. Albert looked over at me. He took off his raincoat. He had barely taken 2 steps toward me, when a loud ripping sound came from behind him. Katerina blinked innocently. Oops. I accidentally tore my raincoat. Albert, can I wear yours, please? I'm cold. Albert's back stiffened. He held the raincoat for a few seconds before handing it to her. My boyfriend is the sweetest. As for the ripped one, I'll just wrap it around my shoes so they don't get any wetter. Rainwater is so dirty. I don't want to touch it at all. She bundled herself up from head to toe. Then she turned to me with a smile. Do I look like a silly little bear? Freya, move in a little closer. You'll get less wet that way. Chapter 08. The rain showed no sign of letting up. Even my phone screen was covered in water. My fingers had turned pale from the cold. I wiped the screen stiffly and unlocked it. Only 7 people were left ahead of me in the ride queue. I couldn't stop shivering, so I crouched down, hugging myself into a ball to stay a little warmer. Katerina wrapped her arms around Albert from the front. This way. I can block the rain for you too. You won't get as wet. Albert gently removed her hands. I don't need it. Just worry about yourself. Don't get soaked. He stood perfectly still, staring into the curtain of rain. Raindrops struck his arm, sliding over his pale skin before dripping from his fingertips. A little while later, a car pulled up in front of us, but it wasn't the rideshare I'd called. It was Albert's family driver. Albert turned to me. "Get in. We'll drive you home." Katerina let out a disappointed, "Huh, it's already so late, and Freya lives really far away. I want to get home early too." Albert looked at her. "Katerina, she's been our classmate for 3 years." His gaze seemed to sting. Katerina smiled. "I never said you couldn't give her a ride. I just never realized my boyfriend was this caring toward his classmates." Another car approached in the distance with its high beams on. I squinted at the license plate. It was the rideshare I'd ordered. I stood up. "No, thanks. My ride's here." With that, I ran through the rain and got into the car. Behind me, Katerina's voice drifted over lightly. "Looks like she doesn't appreciate your kindness." After I got home and took a hot shower, I found 2 missed calls on my phone. Both were from the same local number I didn't recognize. A second later, the number called again. I answered. Albert's voice came through the receiver. "I'm downstairs." I immediately looked out the window. "What are you doing here?" "I brought you some cold medicine." "No thanks. I can buy my own." "You should go." I'm hanging up. Albert's tone didn't change. "Or, I can come upstairs." My parents were still watching TV in the living room, afraid he would actually come up. I threw on a jacket and hurried downstairs. Albert tossed me a bag of medicine. "Freya, wasn't it you who said we should just be ordinary classmates?" The corner of his lips lifted almost imperceptibly. "Do you avoid all your classmates like this?" Before I could respond, Albert had already turned and walked away. I watched his retreating figure, unable to understand what he was so upset about. Chapter 09. When I got to school on Monday morning, I placed the unopened bag of medicine back on Albert's desk. The class monitor had already posted the new seating chart at the front of the classroom. Following the new arrangement, I packed up my things and, while there were still only a few people in class, slowly carried everything to my new seat. By the time morning self-study began, everyone had finished changing seats. Our homeroom teacher walked in and stood at the podium. "Today, we have a new transfer student joining our class. Come on in, Alonso." A boy walked into the classroom. A ripple of excitement spread through the room. "Damn, he's handsome. He's even better looking than the photo I secretly saw in the office the other day." The homeroom teacher scanned the classroom, then pointed to the empty seat beside me. "You can sit there for now. If you have any questions, ask your seatmate." I stared at Alonso's face for 2 seconds. He looked strangely familiar. Chapter 10. Alonso and I didn't exchange a single word all morning. There was a cool, distant look in his eyes that practically said, "Keep your distance." Our last class before lunch was PE. The class's PE representative invited Alonso to join the basketball game. I sat on the steps nearby, my eyes following Alonso. The more I looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. I was so caught up trying to remember where I'd seen him before, that I didn't even notice how naturally he and Albert played together. Then it hit me, the last time I had called Albert, after finishing classroom duty that day. I left school. The cramps from my period still hadn't eased much, and I felt weak all over. When I got on the bus, a sudden break nearly threw me off balance. Fortunately, someone grabbed my arm just in time. The boy stood up from his seat. "Come here. You can sit." "Thank you." I sat down. My head was spinning, and I never got a clear look at his face. At one stop, a middle-aged man boarded the bus. He stopped right in front of me, his stomach strained so tightly against his dress shirt that it looked ready to burst. I had to press myself against the window just to avoid brushing against him. Seeing that, the boy quietly walked over and stood between the man and me. The choking smell of cigarettes and alcohol was instantly replaced by the clean, refreshing scent coming from him. I tugged lightly on his sleeve. He lowered his head to look at me. I thanked him again, this time sincerely. He turned back to his phone, answered with a quiet "MHM." Only now did I realize that boy had been Alonso. Later, the bus became more and more crowded. My eyelids grew heavier until I was dozing against the window. The bus stopped at another station. Alonso stood up. I thought he was getting off. Instead, he simply glanced at me, then lowered his head and went back to scrolling through his phone. I woke up a little more. Aren't you tired? You should sit down. Thanks for letting me have your seat for so long. The moment I stood up, Alonso gently pressed me back into the seat. Don't worry about me. If you're sleepy, just sleep, eventually. I really did fall asleep. I vaguely woke up a few times along the way. Every time, Alonso was still there, by the last few stops. The bus had gradually emptied. When I woke up again, Alonso was already gone. Chapter 11. I decided to treat Alonso to lunch as a thank you. The dismissal bell rang. I jogged over to find him. Alonso was surrounded by a crowd of classmates. Albert handed him a bottle of water. Long time no see. Dinner tonight? Katerina held out a towel as well. Our treat. She deliberately emphasized our. Alonso immediately caught on. So, you two are together now? Wasn't it obvious? I froze where I stood. It felt as though a wad of soaking wet cotton had lodged itself in my throat. For a moment, I could barely breathe. Katerina spotted me and tilted her head. Freya, were you looking for someone? Everyone turned to look at me. I opened my mouth and struggled to find my voice. No, I wasn't looking for anyone. Then I walked past them as calmly as I could, watching Katerina chat so naturally with Alonso. It was like my trauma had been triggered. I could barely stop myself from trembling. I kept replaying the day I first met Alonso, and before I knew it, my thoughts had spiraled to the darkest possibility. What if everything that happened on the bus that day had been intentional? What if Alonso was just like Albert? What if he liked Katerina too, and had only approached me because she told him to, just so they could make a fool out of me together? I would never forget how completely shattered I was on my birthday. When Albert suddenly broke up with me without any warning, I grabbed his hand, begging him to stop joking. He pulled away. Then he told me he loved someone else. That dating me had only been part of a bet. Being with you was no different from completing an assignment. Once the 3 months were up, my job was done. That's the reality. So let's be practical. What kind of compensation do you want? My thoughts slowly returned to the present. Only then did I realize I had been clenching my fists so tightly that crescent-shaped marks had formed in my palms. When I finally calmed down, only one thought remained. Stay away from Alonso. Chapter 12. During lunch break, I sat in the gazebo on campus memorizing vocabulary. The class arts representative came over with 2 other girls. After chatting about random things for a while, they finally asked, a little awkwardly, Freya, how's it going with your new seatmate? Have you gotten close yet? When you have time, could you help us find out if he has a girlfriend? And if he doesn't, maybe ask what kind of girl he likes? I shook my head. We're not close. I probably can't help you. I'm planning to ask our homeroom teacher to change seats. Normally, seats were only changed every 2 months, without a good reason. Asking to switch early would make the teacher suspicious. That was why Katerina had never dared request a seat change before. She was afraid people would suspect she was dating Albert. But Alonso and I had only just become seatmates. Finding an excuse to switch shouldn't be too difficult. Huh? Why? You have no idea how many people want to sit next to him. Did he do something to upset you? No. My expression remained calm. I just don't like him. Okay. If you really switch seats, can I trade with you? The girls left. I went back to memorizing vocabulary. The vines behind the gazebo rustled softly. I turned around. Alonso stepped out from behind them, meeting my eyes with an amused smile. The first time I'd ever talked behind someone's back. And I got caught. He raised a hand. My first instinct was that he was going to hit me. I squeezed my eyes shut. Instead, he simply flipped open the first page of my vocabulary notebook to read my name. Freya? He glanced at me. You should change your name to ungrateful. Clearly, he remembered the bus ride too. Alonso let out a laugh of disbelief. He tapped my notebook lightly against his palm. I've got the same question those girls asked. Did I ever do something to offend you? I pressed my lips together, feeling embarrassed. Alonso straightened up and looked down at me from above. A long moment passed. Then the warning bell rang. He casually tossed the notebook back onto the table in front of me. Interesting. His footsteps gradually faded away. When I saw him heading toward the school gate, I instinctively called after him. Class is about to start. Without turning around, Alonso replied. Wouldn't going back just get on your nerves? I'm not desperate enough to stick around where I'm clearly not wanted. Chapter 13. Alonso never came back to school that afternoon. During the breaks, I rested my head on my desk, absent-mindedly staring at his empty seat. The look on his face before he left, so obviously angry, kept replaying in my mind. Suddenly, I wondered, had I really wronged him? After all, running into someone by coincidence outside of school was incredibly unlikely. My shoulders slumped as I let out a frustrated sigh. Maybe I really was ungrateful. When school ended that afternoon, I spotted Alonso standing near the front gate. I rubbed my fingertips together, wondering if I should go apologize. Before I could decide, Katerina hurried past me and ran over to him. Let's head to the restaurant first. Albert got held back by the homeroom teacher to talk about the competition. He'll come over once he's done. Alonso slowly withdrew his gaze from me. Then he left with Katerina. They walked ahead of me. Katerina kept trying to make conversation, while Alonso only replied every now and then. From what I overheard, I finally pieced things together. Alonso and Katerina weren't close at all. He was simply Albert's friend. So, I really had misunderstood him. The guilt made me lower my head even further, until 4 people suddenly blocked my path. I looked up. They were a group of local thugs who had dropped out of school long ago and often hung around nearby. The one in front smiled at me. Hey, beautiful. Can I get your number? The guy beside him looked me up and down. Ale's got good taste. I'm already bored of those flashy bombshells. This sweet, innocent type is pretty interesting too. Up ahead. Alonso stopped walking and looked over. Katerina casually said, It's fine. You don't have to get involved. I know Freya pretty well. If a guy chases her for a couple of months, she'll say yes. I'm not saying she's easy. I just think she's desperate to be loved. Now that another guy wants to date her, she'll probably enjoy the attention. I doubt she'll turn him down. Come on, let's go. Alonso neither agreed nor disagreed. He simply looked at me. Do you want to date him? I knew he was asking because he was ready to step in, with the thug's burning stare fixed on me. I shook my head. Alonso's expression didn't change. Then come here. What are you standing there for? Don't you want to go home? I had barely taken one cautious step when the thug grabbed my shoulder. Oh, so now you two are having a conversation? You pretending I'm not here? Alonso's eyes dropped to the thug's hand on my shoulder, then lifted to his face. You've got a habit of putting your hands where they don't belong? Mind your own damn business. The thug had barely finished speaking when Alonso kicked the back of his knee. His legs buckled, and he crashed to the ground. Alonso pressed a hand onto his shoulder. His grip tightened. You like grabbing people's shoulders so much? Then let me grab yours. I had no idea where Alonso was pressing, but the thug's face twisted in agony as he screamed. Shit! My bad! My bad! Bro! I was wrong! Please! My arm's gonna break. Only then did Alonso slowly let go, watching the 4 of them run away in panic. I couldn't help feeling relieved. He was terrifying in a fight. Good thing he hadn't actually hit me at lunch. Chapter 14. Just as the group left, Albert walked out of the school. You've been out here this long? Why are you still standing at the gate? Katerina curled her lips into a smile. We just watched a damsel in distress rescue. It was pretty entertaining. Now that the show's over, let's go. As Alonso turned to leave, I called out softly. Alonso, I need to talk to you. He turned around, looked at me for a few seconds, then said to Albert, You guys go ahead. Albert didn't move. He glanced at me too. What? Katerina tugged him away. Oh, come on. They're having a private conversation. Don't be so clueless about personal space. A withered yellow leaf drifted to my feet. I shifted my toes nervously and kicked it a few inches away. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things today. It's normal to dislike someone at first sight. You don't need to apologize. His voice remained calm. Is that all you wanted to say? If you're done, I'm leaving. I stumbled over my words. I didn't dislike you at first sight. During PE today, I finally realized you were the one who helped me on the bus before. After class, I went looking for you because I wanted to treat you to a meal to thank you. I explained as quickly as I could. But then I saw that you were friends with Albert and Katerina. I paused before continuing. I've had issues with them before, and I don't really like them, so I instinctively assumed you were the same kind of person and wanted to stay away from you. That's why I said those things at lunch. I'm really sorry. And thank you for putting our differences aside and saving me again just now. I summed up everything between Albert and me with a simple "we had issues." Whether Albert had told Alonso about the bet or not, I didn't want to bring it up again. Alonso folded his arms. After listening to everything, he commented lazily. Didn't expect you to be so old-fashioned. Huh? Still playing that ancient guilt by association game. I was speechless, embarrassed. I lowered my head again. He said, "Come on, you little ingrate." I looked up at him. "My name is Freya," he replied. "Not important. So where are we going? Weren't you the one who said you'd treat me to dinner?" I blinked. "But didn't you already make plans with Albert and the others?" "I'm not going." His gaze swept over me from head to toe as he replied lazily. "Catching up with them isn't nearly as interesting as watching a little ingrate repent." I genuinely thought this guy was incredibly petty. Following behind him, I muttered in protest. "But I already apologized. And I'm buying you dinner. That means I'm not an ingrate anymore." The corner of his lips lifted slightly. He looked completely uninterested in arguing with me. "You're pretty good at giving yourself an easy way out." Chapter 15. Alonso picked a little dumpling stand. A small order cost only 6 yuan. I'd already braced myself for him to choose a restaurant where dinner would cost over 100 per person. I squeezed my wallet and asked, "Are you sure this is all you want?" Alonso shot me a sideways glance. "What? You don't want to treat me anymore?" "No. No." I patted my wallet reassuringly, then tucked it back into my warm pocket. After ordering, he called Albert. "I've got something to do. I'm not coming. You guys go ahead." Albert was silent for 2 seconds. Then he spoke in his usual casual tone. "What could possibly be more important than catching up with your friends? Do you know how many years it's been since we last saw each other?" It was already past the dinner rush. The little food stall was quiet. The teasing voices coming through the phone were impossible not to overhear. "Come on, Albert, stop rushing him. He's obviously with a girl. You don't know this." But not long after he got to a city last month, he went out one day. When he came back, he said he'd finally figured out what his ideal type looked like. I was completely shocked. I never thought this guy would actually fall for someone. Albert's voice sounded distant. "Really? Let's hear it. So, what's his ideal type?" Alonso clearly had no interest in their gossip. "Send me the bill later. This meal's on me. That's it. Bye." He hung up. Just then, our dumplings arrived. Steam curled up from the bowls. I scooped one up and blew on it gently. His friends really thought too highly of him. He wasn't ditching them because he was with a girl. He'd only skipped dinner to watch me apologize, then take the opportunity to make sarcastic comments at my expense. Chapter 16. After dinner, I even accompanied Alonso to buy a few workbooks he needed. When we said goodbye, he didn't look angry anymore. I thought the whole thing was finally behind us. Until the next morning, the moment Alonso walked into the classroom. He started staring at me. I endured it for as long as I could before finally giving in. "Why do you keep looking at me?" He leaned back in his chair and gave a lazy "oh." "I just find it kind of interesting. I honestly thought when I came in today, my seatmate wouldn't be you anymore." I was speechless. Was he seriously still on about this? He was still holding a grudge over what I'd said about changing seats yesterday. I took a deep breath. "Didn't we already make up yesterday?" Alonso raised an eyebrow. "When did I ever agree to that?" "Oh, right. I forgot to mention something. I'm petty, and I hold grudges. Once someone ticks me off, I stay mad for a long time." The way he said it made him look incredibly punchable. I almost splashed the soy milk in my hand straight onto his face. As it turned out, his bark was far worse than his bite. He'd stopped caring about the whole thing ages ago, after spending a week as his seatmate. I realized he was actually a genuinely nice person. One evening, my English teacher kept me after class for a long talk. By the time I got back to the classroom, Alonso was still waiting at his desk. He walked me to the bus stop, and didn't leave until he watched me get on the bus. He wasn't anything like Albert and the others. The only strange thing was, during yesterday's physics quiz, Alonso got nearly 80% of the questions right, but ever since transferring here, he'd barely listened in class. Sometimes he even skipped school altogether. Had he been an excellent student before? If so, why didn't he want to study anymore? Chapter 17. Every day during lunch break, the school broadcast either played music or aired student announcements. There were 2 student hosts, chosen on a rotating basis from the Chinese class representatives of each junior and senior class. That day, it was my turn along with the representative from the class next door. Just after we finished reading the last announcement, someone knocked on the studio door. The other student host beside me turned around. Seeing Albert, she smiled knowingly. Here to see Katerina? She's in the office picking out scripts. I'll go get her for you. Katerina had won a national first prize for her essay writing. The broadcasting club often asked her to help select the scripts that would be read on air. Soon, only Albert and I were left in the studio. I acted as if he wasn't there and adjusted the equipment before starting the next song. Then, without warning, his voice came from behind me. How do you know Alonso? I had no intention of responding. After a moment, Albert spoke again, seemingly out of nowhere. Freya, you're still into me, aren't you? I stared at him in disbelief. What the hell is wrong with you? Leaning casually against the doorframe, he kept his eyes on me. You avoid me every time you see me. Is that really how someone looks after they've moved on? I was so stunned by his absurd logic that I couldn't find the words to answer. Just then, hushed voices outside the door caught my attention. I think I heard them talking about whether someone likes someone. Should we go in? It was the other student host who had just left. Why? Did you already forget what Katerina told us? Didn't she say Freya keeps trying to steal her boyfriend? Now they're alone in the same room, and I just heard something about liking someone. Who knows? Maybe she's trying to make a move on Albert again. As Katerina's friends, shouldn't we go in and keep an eye on Freya? Just in case she tries something worse. I almost laughed. Then I turned to Albert. What exactly have I ever done to you two that was so terrible? Albert didn't answer. Instead, he kicked the door open. The deafening bang startled both girls. Albert smiled faintly and looked straight at them. So, what were you two talking about? Why don't you let me hear it too? Chapter 18. The commotion was loud enough to draw people out of the nearby offices. After hearing what had happened, Katerina's expression barely changed. She still wore a smile. I was only joking. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Freya hasn't even said anything. I looked straight at her. I mind. So I want you to apologize. Katerina's smile froze. Fine. I'm sorry. My bad. I shouldn't have joked around like that. Please forgive me. I corrected her calmly. Don't dodge the real issue. The problem isn't that you made a joke. It's that you spread rumors about me. And if you're apologizing, shouldn't you at least be sincere? Why are you being so casual? Are we even close enough for that? The smile disappeared from Katerina's face completely. She glanced at Albert, clearly hoping he'd stand up for her. Instead, he simply lifted his chin, signaling for her to do as I asked. Katerina looked around. Everyone was watching her with complicated expressions. Whispers floated through the room. She had always been the one everyone admired. She had never been humiliated like this before. Her fingernails dug into her palms. Then she bowed to me. I'm sorry, Freya. I was wrong. I let my jealousy get the better of me and spread false rumors about you. I looked at her quietly for 2 seconds, without another word. I turned and left the broadcasting room. Albert caught up to me on the sports field. I'm sorry. I nodded. Okay. I've heard your apology. Now could you stop following me? Albert pressed his lips together. Freya, stop. Don't say another word to me. You asked me earlier if I still liked you. Albert, listen carefully. I spoke slowly, one word at a time. I don't like you. Not even a little. The only reason I avoid you is because I can't stand you. So I hope that from now on, both you and your girlfriend stay as far away from me as possible. The less we have to do with each other, the better. Albert froze. Then he slowly let go of my wrist. On either side of the stage by the sports field were rows of bleacher seats. Lunch break wasn't over yet. I didn't want to go back to the classroom, so I ran up to the highest row and sat down. My vision blurred. I sniffled. And finally broke into tears. I buried my face in my knees, crying so hard I couldn't stop. I had no idea how much time had passed. Then a shadow fell over me. I looked up. Alonso stood there with one eyebrow slightly raised. "What are you doing here?" I choked back another sob, and buried my face again. The smile faded from his face. He crouched down in front of me. "Did someone hurt you? Can I help?" I shook my head. I already handled it, seeing that I didn't want to talk about it. He didn't press any further. Then, "I'll get going." I nodded. He walked away. And little by little, my crying eased. But after a short while, Alonso came back. He was holding a peach milk tea topped with cheese foam. Without a word, he pressed the cold cup gently against my tear-flushed cheek. "Don't cry anymore." I accepted the drink. He reached out and flicked the two little tufts of hair sticking up on top of my head. Then chuckled. "You've cried so much your hairs started sprouting." Chapter 19. After that day, Albert and Katerina seemed to have fallen into a cold war. Katerina often came to school with red, swollen eyes. Some people guessed they'd broken up. But all she ever gave were vague, non-committal answers. As soon as word spread that Albert was supposedly single again, fewer girls kept pursuing Alonso. Part of it was because their attention shifted back to Albert. The other reason was that Alonso was simply too distant to approach. During the long morning break, the prettiest girl from the class next door came to find Alonso again. "I heard you're into sci-fi movies. The new one comes out this Saturday. I've got tickets to the premiere. Want to go with me?" Alonso twirled a pen between his fingers without even looking up. "Thanks. Not interested." She kept staring at him. "Then what are you interested in? What kind of girl do you actually like?" Alonso answered without hesitation. "Pretty girls." She frowned. "I'm not pretty." He let out a slow, thoughtful then added, "The prettiest." She scoffed. "You're awfully picky. As far as I know, your family's pretty average. Your grades are average too. You're just a handsome guy. It's not like you have that much to be arrogant about." Alonso still looked as lazy and indifferent as ever. "You're right." The girl immediately sensed something was off. "Don't tell me. You already like someone?" The PE representative had just walked back into the classroom. Seeing the scene, he jumped into the conversation. "He does. He definitely does. I don't know who she is either, but he really likes someone. As for why he hasn't confessed yet, Alonso said the timing isn't right. So seriously, you should give up now. Don't waste your time barking up the wrong tree." Since it was gossip, I couldn't help listening in too. The more I heard, the more convinced I became that I knew exactly who Alonso liked. The prettiest girl. The timing isn't right. Wasn't that obviously Katerina? She'd won the campus beauty poll last year. And the timing isn't right. Did that mean Albert and Katerina hadn't completely broken up yet? I looked at Alonso, wanting to say something but stopping myself. "What?" he asked. It was a terrible thing to say, but I couldn't help myself. "You've got terrible taste." Alonso looked completely confused. Chapter 20. After realizing Alonso liked Katerina, I decided it would be better to keep my distance from him. I barely spoke to him the entire day. When school ended, he sprawled lazily across his seat, blocking my way out. "First, tell me what's wrong." I looked at him, confused. "What's wrong with me?" Alonso let out a cold laugh. "You tell me, kid. You've ignored me all day. I talked to you, you ignored me. I bought you milk tea, you wouldn't take it. I even offered to carry the homework to the office for you, and you wouldn't let me. What did I do to upset you?" One by one, everyone else left the classroom. Soon, only the two of us remained, clutching my backpack strap. I decided to just tell him, "I know who you like. So, I think it'd be better if we kept our distance from now on." Alonso's expression instantly tightened. He didn't say a word. This time, when I tried to leave, he didn't stop me. I couldn't understand why he suddenly looked so awful. Before leaving, I couldn't help trying to encourage him. Anyway, I hope things work out with Katerina. It looks like she and Albert really did break up, but I honestly don't like her. So if you two end up together someday, it's probably best if we don't keep in touch anymore. Alonso grabbed my arm and pulled me back. Hold on. What are you talking about? I repeated every bit of reasoning I'd come up with that morning about why I thought he liked Katerina. The way he looked at me was like he was staring at a cat that had somehow learned to ride a unicycle. After a long pause, he finally spoke. The people who voted in your school's beauty contest must have had some seriously questionable taste. Anyone can end up in first place. Huh? I don't like her. Next time something like this comes up, ask me. Don't make up an entire story in your head and then unilaterally cut me out of your life. He picked up his backpack as well, as we walked out of school together. He kept pressing a hand against his chest every now and then. I looked at him uncertainly. Does your heart hurt? A mocking smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It almost died just now. Kid. Still, my guess hadn't been completely baseless. Other people had reached the same conclusion after overhearing what he'd said yesterday. Eventually, the rumor made its way to Katerina. After class, she came to find Alonso with eyes that were still red from crying. You like me? Then how about we date? She sounded more like she was acting out of spite than sincerity. As she spoke, she deliberately glanced toward Albert. Alonso looked at her. Did you forget to take your meds before you left home? Katerina stubbornly continued. Then explain this. After you found out Albert and I were together, you started keeping your distance from me. Weren't we friends before? Weren't you avoiding me on purpose? Alonso genuinely felt like he'd run into a ghost lately, because one ridiculous misunderstanding after another just kept landing in his lap. We weren't, and the reason I don't talk to you now is simply because my seatmate doesn't like you. He said it with complete seriousness. I copy her homework. So naturally, I'm on her side. Katerina turned to look at Albert. She expected to see ridicule in his eyes. Instead, he wasn't looking at her at all. He was quietly studying Alonso. Deep in thought. Chapter 21. By the time Alonso arrived at the bar on Saturday night, he was already late. The complaints started the moment he walked in. Among everyone there, Alonso and Albert were considered pretty close. But that night, Albert kept his head down, drinking in silence. The two of them didn't exchange a single word. The atmosphere was strangely tense as the night wore on. Some people had already passed out in the booths, while others headed to the dance floor. Only Alonso and Albert were still sitting at the table. Albert set down his glass. How are things between you and my ex-girlfriend? Alonso looked up at him. Albert smiled. Your seatmate. We broke up 3 months ago. He laid everything out from beginning to end. I wasn't thinking straight back then. I didn't realize the person I'd loved all along was her. I hurt her, and now she barely talks to me. He paused. I want to win her back. We're friends. You two get along pretty well. Could you put in a good word for me? Confetti rained down from above. The DJ shouted into the microphone, his bass-heavy voice shaking the room, while the crowd on the dance floor roared back. The excitement reached its peak, yet their corner remained unexpectedly quiet. So quiet that the silence itself became suffocating. From the moment Albert started talking, Alonso had been lounging lazily against the booth without the slightest reaction. A long while later, he drained the rest of his drink in one gulp. Then he finally answered. Can't help you. What a coincidence. I like her too. Albert didn't look surprised at all. That's new. I didn't think you'd ever fall for someone. But instead of wasting your time on this, you should focus on dealing with your dad. Your half-brother knows exactly how to sweet-talk him. Your father's practically wrapped around his finger. And you? You skip class. You've completely given up on school. You do nothing but fight your old man. If you keep this up, you'll end up with nothing. As for Freya, don't waste your effort. I can tell, she doesn't like you. The two men held each other's gaze across the table. Neither was willing to back down. A confident smile curved Albert's lips. When she likes someone, the way she looks at them is different. I've seen it. Chapter 22. Lately, a viral cookie had been all over social media. Since I had nothing to do on Sunday, I decided to try making it myself. Early Monday morning, I brought a box to school and shared it with the few friends I was close to. Alonso was one of them. He usually arrived pretty late, so I left the cookie box on his desk. When he walked into the classroom that morning, he looked unusually tired. His expression was colder than usual. Without even glancing at the cookies, he tossed the whole box to the PE representative. I sighed. You don't like cookies? He lowered his eyelids. Okay. Then I'll bring you something else next time. That finally got a reaction out of him. You made these? I nodded. Alonso turned to the PE representative. Give me the cookies back. The PE representative was speechless. Seriously? Reluctantly, he handed the box back. But Alonso still wasn't satisfied. His eyes stayed fixed on the very first cookie the guy had already taken out. Come on, Alonso. I've already got this one in my hand. Just let me have it. I was so embarrassed by Alonso that I quickly pulled him back. I thought you said you didn't like cookies. No. He let me tug him back into his seat. I just didn't hear that they were cookies. I watched as he took a bite. Are they good? Alonso nodded. They're good. Why'd you give these to me? I was bored on Sunday, so I tried making them. I gave some to all the friends I'm close to. The moment he heard that last sentence, the corner of his lips lifted ever so slightly. Chapter 23. For several days in a row, something about Alonso seemed off. And yet, at the same time, he didn't seem any different from usual. Our senior year wasn't particularly stressful. The school was even worried we'd be under too much pressure. So they organized an autumn hiking trip. The higher we climbed, the more exhausted I became. Alonso, on the other hand, wasn't even breathing hard. He picked up a walking stick and handed it to me. For the second half of the hike, he practically dragged me up the mountain. After we reached the top, I spread out a picnic blanket and patted the spot beside me. Aren't you tired? He sat down as I asked, and handed me a bottle of water. The breeze at the summit was cool and refreshing. I barely had a chance to enjoy it before the next thing out of his mouth nearly ruined my entire day. Albert asked me to help him win you back. Not long ago, he and Katerina had officially broken up. Ever since then, I kept running into Albert everywhere. At the breakfast stand, at the gazebo where I memorized vocabulary. The moment I saw him, I'd immediately turn around and leave. So that was why he was trying to chase me again. Alonso continued. I turned him down. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. Opening my lunch box, I handed him a slice of the apple pie I'd baked. You're a real friend. Because I told him, I'm going after you too. I froze, still holding the slice of pie in midair. Alonso didn't seem to notice. He took it from me and casually said, Thanks. That night at the bar, Albert's words hadn't shaken him in the slightest. So what if he'd seen it? I haven't even started pursuing her yet. Why should she already like me? He set his empty glass back on the table with a soft clink. Alonso stood up. The two of them locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Enough talking. I'm not helping you. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Because I'm going after her too. By the time Alonso finished the last bite of apple pie, I'd finally regained control of my body. I lowered my head, staring blankly at the pie left in the lunchbox. This apple pie was certainly full of apples. Alonso suddenly asked, Do you remember what you said the first day I transferred here? The day you wanted to change seats. I just don't like Alonso. I nodded quietly. I'm the opposite. The very first time I saw you, on that bus, I liked you. I guess that means you're exactly my type. My fingers tightened around the lunchbox. My mind went completely blank. The wind rattled the zipper on Alonso's windbreaker. It wasn't loud, yet somehow, the sound completely threw my thoughts into chaos. Until, Freya, did you bring apple pie? I made Basque cheesecake. Want to trade me a piece? I snapped back to reality. Huh? Oh, sure. Keeping my head lowered, I hurriedly grabbed my lunchbox and fled. Chapter 24. From that day on, I started avoiding Alonso. During class, I stacked my books into a tall wall on my desk, just so I wouldn't accidentally look over at him. Every morning, The moment I caught him entering the classroom out of the corner of my eye, my whole body tensed up. I wanted nothing more than to bury my face inside my books. The PE representative looked at Alonso in surprise. "You're here this early? Don't tell me you stayed up all night boosting someone's game again." Alonso pulled out his chair and sat down. The physics quiz papers had just been handed back. He'd scored 83. His gaze paused on the paper for the briefest moment. Then his expression returned to normal. He folded it away before replying. "MHM. I'd heard the PE representative mention it several times before. Alonso was incredibly good at gaming. He earned money by taking paid boosting jobs while still going to school. I never dared ask. What about his parents?" The PE representative sighed. "So if you've been gaming all night, I'm guessing you skipped breakfast again?" I already ate all the snacks those girls brought you. Sorry." Alonso waved him off. He said he'd been awake all night anyway. So he didn't really have an appetite. He just wanted to get some sleep, without realizing it. I kept tugging at the corner of my vocabulary notebook. Alonso had stomach problems. Skipping breakfast would only make them worse. Before morning self-study began, I hurried to the school convenience store. Fortunately, Alonso was still awake when I got back. "Alonso, can you transfer me 9.5 yuan?" Resting his head against one hand, he forced a tired smile. "So, you're willing to talk to me today? Just send it first. And don't send extra," I added seriously. He transferred the money. I accepted it. Then took a carton of milk and a loaf of bread out of my backpack. "I stopped by the convenience store just now. It came to 9 yuan. The extra 50 cents is your delivery fee. This is just a normal transaction between classmates. So please don't read anything into it." I sounded completely serious. Alonso, however, didn't seem to hear a word after I handed him the food. He simply looked down at the bread in his hand. "So, you went out just to buy this for me?" "I was passing by. I told you, I was just passing by." He laughed, then played along with my excuse. "So you're only charging me 50 cents for delivery?" "Yep, that's my standard rate." Chapter 25. Alonso slept through the entire morning. One of the classes was our homeroom teacher's. She handed out a worksheet for us to complete. Then she stepped down from the podium and walked around the classroom, checking everyone's work. When she passed Alonso, she didn't wake him. She simply picked up his physics test paper with a score of 83, looked at it for a moment, sighed, and put it back. I couldn't understand why our homeroom teacher treated him so differently, or how Alonso could stay in the top 30 of the class without ever studying. After all, we were in the advanced class. Being top 30 here meant ranking around the top 50 in the entire grade. That afternoon, Alonso was called out by our homeroom teacher and never came back. After school, it was my turn to stay on cleaning duty. Today, I was assigned to clean the teacher's office. I knocked, walked in, and unexpectedly ran into two people. Alonso. Standing across from him was an elegant middle-aged man. He looked strangely familiar. I quietly swept the floor. Our homeroom teacher sighed regretfully. "I looked over your transcripts before you transferred here. Your total score was never below 700. So why did you stop trying after you came here? You're throwing away your own future. In just 3 months, you've almost dropped below 600. At this rate, I had no choice but to ask Chairman Jean to come." Alonso listened indifferently, saying nothing. Then I remembered where I'd seen that man's face before. Once, in the grade director's office. Chairman Jean, the biggest shareholder of our school. His surname was Jean, the same Jean in Alonso Jean. After sweeping the floor, I went to rinse the mop and came back to mop the office. Chairman Jean kept looking at Alonso with disappointment written all over his face. "Are you doing this just to spite me? Do you know you're my own son? Everything I have will belong to you one day. But look at yourself now. You, sir, could you step aside for a second? I need to mop here." "Oh, right. Of course." Alonso glanced at me. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. "You're still smiling? How can you still smile? I heard you've been making money boosting people's game accounts, hanging around with that kind of crowd." "Sir, I need to mop over here too. Could you move a little more?" "Thanks." Chairman Jean stepped aside again. "Now, where was I? Are you done yet?" Alonso looked at him coldly. If you want me to save you some face in front of other people, then start by keeping yourself in line. Don't come pretending to be some strict father lecturing me. Chairman Jin's face flushed bright red. Alonso, you, sir, you're standing on a piece of paper. Could you lift your foot for a second? I smiled politely, holding the mop. Chairman Jin left. Alonso and I returned to the classroom. As usual, only the two of us were left. He leaned casually against a desk and looked at me. Hey, little girl, want to hear a juicy rich family drama? I was speechless. Alonso's family owned the largest company in the city. When Alonso was in 9th grade, Chairman Jin's affair and his illegitimate son were exposed. His mother divorced him and moved overseas alone. Unable to forgive his father, Alonso returned to his hometown to live with his grandmother. But 3 years later, his grandmother's health had grown worse. The town's living environment and medical care weren't suitable for her recovery. In the end, Alonso agreed to transfer back to a city. That was the biggest compromise he was willing to make. He had been boosting game accounts professionally since his first year of high school and had saved up a fair amount of money. He refused to take a single cent from his father and rented an apartment to live on his own. On the day he enrolled, his father told him, "You have to study hard. Look at your younger brother. He's always worked so hard. As the older brother, don't fall behind." That sentence disgusted Alonso. Almost out of spite, he didn't listen to a single class after that. So, interesting enough for you? He teased me. I ignored him. After a long silence, I looked at him seriously. Alonso, you actually like physics, don't you? He froze for a moment, then slowly turned to meet my eyes. I said, "The other day, our teacher accidentally handed out an extra copy of my physics competition paper. After I put it back on the podium, I saw you take it. That was the most focused I've ever seen you. When you solved that problem, you smiled. You looked even happier than when you sank 3 three-pointers in a row on the basketball court." Chapter 26. His fingers tapped lazily against the desk. His eyes were lowered, his emotions carefully hidden. I couldn't tell what he was thinking. I pursed my lips and added, "But you still solved it slower than I did." Noob. Alonso let out a quiet chuckle. "I haven't studied in forever." "Well, even so," I softly repeated. "You're still a noob." He laughed in defeat. "Fine, you win." But Chairman Jin was right about one thing. Don't use your dreams just to spite him. You love physics so much. You must have dreamed of studying physics at a university. There are people there who are just as talented as you. And people even better. You've imagined solving difficult problems with them, haven't you? I took a step toward him. "Alonso, let's study hard together. I don't think skipping classes and giving up is who you really are. And I don't think you even like living like this." He raised an eyebrow. "You know me that well?" I stared at him stubbornly. "Will you? Let's work hard together. Let's get into a university together." He still wore that carefree grin. Holding out his hand, he said, "Hold my hand, and I'll say yes." Seriously? My palms instantly became sweaty. Whatever. Holding hands once wasn't impossible. I was just about to reach for him. Then Alonso laughed. "Forget it. I was just teasing you." I was speechless. He glanced at my expression, clearly amused. "What? Were you actually going to hold my hand?" "Oh, sorry. I wasn't planning to." He shamelessly continued. "We're not even dating yet, and you're already trying to get handsy with me? You really think I'm that easy?" "Huh, little girl?" I seriously wanted to punch him. Alonso really did start studying seriously. At first, nobody took him seriously. Everyone thought it was just another 3-minute obsession. Until one day, during physics class, he solved an extremely difficult Olympiad-level problem. Our PE class representative gasped. "Holy crap. Alonso, you actually know this stuff? I always thought the only reason you could still score around 600 without studying was because you cheated." Alonso couldn't even be bothered to respond. His grades steadily improved, but after he reached the top 30 in the grade, his progress slowed. After all, everyone at that level worked incredibly hard, even if he was gifted and smarter than most people. Our fundamentals were still much stronger than his. Unlike him, we hadn't wasted 3 months. One afternoon during lunch break, we worked on a Chinese exam paper together. Chinese was one of my strongest subjects, so I finished before he did. I set down my pen and turned to look at him. Whenever he concentrated, there wasn't the slightest trace of his usual playful attitude. He looked like a quiet, outstanding student. Only then did I slowly realize I loved studying with Alonso. I loved solving problems together with him, and I also liked. Chapter 27. Alonso's favorite way to relax was playing basketball. During PE class, I returned to the classroom to review my mistakes. He was outside playing with Albert and the others. Two girls came back from the basketball court, chatting as they walked. I'm telling you, Albert definitely crashed into Alonso on purpose. I saw it. Me too. He absolutely did it on purpose. They've always played rough against each other. No idea why those two can't stand each other. Ugh. Thinking about that huge wound on Alonso's leg gives me chills. I wonder if the school clinic can even handle it. I immediately threw down my pen and ran toward the infirmary. When I arrived, I saw Albert standing in front of Alonso. He was slightly bent over, apparently doing something. Without thinking, I pushed Albert aside and stood in front of Alonso. What are you doing? Albert looked at me silently. Alonso explained for him. He helped me get here. Don't worry. But I heard them say Albert pushed you. Albert smiled faintly without responding. Alonso shook his head. No, he even blocked part of the impact for me. His arm got hurt too, so I had misunderstood. Embarrassed, I looked at Albert. I'm sorry. Without saying a word, he turned and left. Only then did I notice the large scrape covering his arm. The PE representative had gone to get the school doctor. When he came back and saw Albert leaving, he immediately chased after him. Hey, Albert, where are you going? That wound needs to be treated. With the PE representative watching him, Albert wouldn't leave without getting treated. I turned back. My eyes fell on the large, blood-stained wound on Alonso's leg. The deeper I frowned, the more my eyes began to sting. He reached out and gently brushed the corner of my eye. Don't cry. I'm really fine. It just looks scary. It's not that deep. As if trying to distract me, he casually said. Seeing how pitiful I am, why don't you be nice for once and date me? I froze. Hidden from sight, my hand clenched the hem of my shirt, but my voice sounded just as casual as his. Okay. Alonso blinked. The smile faded from his face. What did you say? The laughter from the basketball court outside couldn't drown out the pounding of my heart. I steadied my voice. I said, let's date, Alonso, but not because I feel sorry for you. Meeting his burning gaze, I fought the heat rising to my face and said, because I've realized, I've fallen for you too. Chapter 28. The biggest thing I realized after dating Alonso was, he was unbelievably clingy. After school, he always insisted on taking the bus with me and walking me home. 80% of the time we spent together, he was holding my hand. At this rate, he was going to rub my fingerprints off. On Friday night, we had dinner together before he walked me home. It was completely dark by the time we reached my apartment building. When we got downstairs, he didn't leave. Instead, he held on to me, refusing to let me go. I sighed helplessly. What is it this time? Alonso pulled me into his arms. His eyelashes trembled slightly as he lowered his head. It looked like he was about to kiss me. I froze for a second. My hands rested against his shoulders, but I didn't pull away. Just before our lips met, his lips brushed lightly across my cheek instead. Then he hugged me tightly. Forget it. If I kiss you now, I won't be able to stop. The lower half of my face was buried against his shoulder. I asked quietly, why wouldn't you be able to stop? I'd get addicted. He straightened up. His eyes settled on my lips, growing darker. I'd end up losing control every time I watched you talk. He stayed serious for barely 2 seconds before grinning, and that would interfere with my studying. I'll wait until after graduation. I stomped on his foot in annoyance and ran upstairs. Chapter 29. Without any warning, Katerina went abroad to study. I never imagined that making her apologize publicly at the school broadcasting station would affect her so deeply. She couldn't accept having such a humiliating moment. In truth, not long after it happened, almost everyone who had been there had already forgotten about it. But Katerina never moved on. She became increasingly sensitive. She was convinced people were gossiping about her behind her back. One day, someone anonymously posted on the school's confession page. They said there was a girl in their class who was disgusting because she kept spreading rumors about other people. Katerina completely broke down. Holding up her phone, she shouted across the classroom, "Who posted this?" Everyone looked at her in confusion. Didn't the post say it was about a sophomore class? Aren't we seniors? Katerina, what's wrong with you? She suddenly came to her senses, realizing what she'd just done. She burst into tears and ran out of the classroom. She never came back. Her parents later packed up all her belongings. The next time we heard about her was when one of our classmates saw her latest social media post. Her location was tagged at a private school overseas. She posted a selfie with the caption, "After comparing the two, the classmates here are definitely friendlier. I guess developed countries really are more developed in every way." Chapter 30. As for Albert, his grades had dropped dramatically. On the most recent exam, he had even turned in a blank paper. One day, I was in the teacher's office grading dictation exercises at my Chinese teacher's desk. On the other side of the room, our homeroom teacher had just finished giving Albert a long lecture. She picked up her water bottle. "Think carefully about what I said." Then she went out to refill it. Albert didn't look embarrassed at all. "So, you and Alonso are together now?" I instantly went on guard. "Are you going to report us?" He gave a faint smile. "Freya, just how awful do you think I am now?" Once I was sure he wasn't planning to report us. I lowered my head and continued grading without answering him. He went on speaking to himself. If I'd finished sending all 999 I like you messages that day, would everything have turned out differently? I hated this kind of after-the-fact regret. Expressionless. I dragged him back to the reality right in front of him. "You didn't hand in your dictation assignment. I've marked your name down." Albert let out a self-mocking smile before walking out of the office. After that, he really did stop bothering me. His grades continued to plummet. Some people guessed it was because he was heartbroken. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I looked down on him. He was just using heartbreak as an excuse to give up on himself. Back when I got my heart broken, I never missed turning in a single assignment. I'd go home after school and cry until the middle of the night. Then I'd wipe my tears, walk around with swollen eyes, and still get up to finish my 5-year college entrance exam, 3-year mock exam practice book. If he didn't have the determination to keep going, he had no right to blame me for it. Chapter 31. After the New Year break, we returned to school. The atmosphere leading up to the college entrance exam became even more intense. Even our PE class representatives started taking studying seriously. Alonso had an extraordinary talent for science. His scores in every science subject kept improving steadily. By the final 2 months, he had secured 3rd place in the entire grade. On his best days, he could even rank 2nd. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, 1st place was me. Just casually bringing that up. Alonso ranked 1st in the grade in physics, mathematics, and the combined science exam, but I scored 20 points higher than him in Chinese. Don't underestimate Chinese. The subject has a relatively high floor, but its ceiling is surprisingly low. Whenever Alonso got a reading comprehension multiple choice question wrong, he could never understand why the explanation for the wrong answer was simply, "It doesn't match the author's intended meaning." Chapter 32. The weather was beautiful during the 2 days of the college entrance exam. The sun wasn't harsh. There was even a cool breeze in the air. Before entering the exam hall, I couldn't help thinking that it felt like a good omen. After the exams ended, I checked my answers. My intuition had been right. I had performed better than ever. To celebrate, I drank 2 extra bottles of fruit beer at our class dinner that night. When I noticed Albert and Katerina weren't there, I happily drank 2 more. By the time dinner ended, I was already staggering as I walked. Alonso simply bent down and carried me on his back. "You actually drank? Why don't you smell like alcohol?" Resting my chin on his shoulder, I replied, "Because I rinsed my mouth." Alonso believed me. When we reached my apartment building, he carefully helped me stand. "Go home and make yourself some honey water, so your head won't hurt. If you still don't feel well, remember to." I stood on my tiptoes and gently kissed his lips. I lied. I didn't drink. The hand around my waist tightened instantly. Then why didn't you? Weren't you looking forward to celebrating? My ears immediately grew warm. Whenever I had to say something this straightforward, I couldn't help getting embarrassed. If I'd been drinking beer, our kiss wouldn't have tasted as sweet. I only had peach cheese tea. Alonso, remember this. Your first kiss tasted like peaches. As for why it tasted like peaches, that day at the broadcasting station, Katerina had made me cry. Alonso showed up and pressed a cup of ice-cold peach cheese tea against my face to cool me down. The clean scent of sunshine and fresh laundry detergent clinging to his school uniform wrapped around me. Standing against the light, he reached out and gently smoothed down the strand of hair sticking up on my head. Smiling, he said, "If you keep crying, you're going to start sprouting." I clearly remembered my heart skipping a beat. Back then, though, I didn't realize I had fallen for him. I thought Albert and Katerina had simply made me so angry that my heart was racing.